Hi guys, welcome to my review of Cyberpunk 2077. Now I know I'm a bit late to the party on this one, but as I'm sure you guys are all aware, there's been a lot of issues with this at game's launch, and I wanted to give them a bit of time just to get a few of the hot fixes in, get a few patches in there and see what the state of the game was after about a month or so of release. So they've recently just come out with patch 1.06, so I now feel is the time to review, when coming to the new year, what state is the game in and is it worth you spending your money in at the moment. So for the guys that have been living under a rock and maybe don't know what Cyberpunk is, let's do a quick kind of overview. What is the game? Cyberpunk 2077 is an open world action adventure set in Night City. It's a megalopolis which is obsessed with power, glamour and body modification. You play as a character called V, who's a mercenary outlaw going after a one-of-a-kind implant that is the key to immortality. So you can customise your character, cyberware skill set, play style and explore the vast city where the choices you make shape the world and story around you. One of the key things is they've called it an action adventure, so they've removed the RPG side of it, even though it still does have RPG elements in the game, so you may see me refer to certain things in an RPG kind of way. This review is going to be spoiler free, so you won't have to worry about me giving away any elements of the story. So let's get to the review. Okay, so to begin with, how does it play? Well, what I'm going to do is put a bit of a chart up in front of you for PC system requirements, and this chart is pretty good because it gives you minimum to ultra and then including ray tracing minimum to ultra as well, to give you a bit of a guideline. Now there has been a hot fix which has come out, which was 1.05, which is the fix for optimisation on the lower end systems, mainly hitting like the Ryzen chips and stuff like that, to basically make it so you can get the most performance out of those lower end systems. If you've got a higher end system including higher end Ryzen, you won't come across the problems as much. You may experience a 2 to 3 frame increase from the hotfix, but it really only affected the lower end chips. Now the minimum requirements I think are a little bit generous, and I would probably suggest having something a bit more than that, but the recommended I'd say would work relatively fine. I mean, I was working on a 5820K i7 along with a 5700 XT, and it worked along absolutely perfectly with no issues whatsoever. Performance wise though, I haven't had any issues, or especially not any of the ones that have been reported. There obviously are problems there, they're very well documented, so there is work to be done still there. I don't know whether the hotfixes have kind of got rid of a lot of those, which is why I haven't hit them, but I'm also working in 1080p, so that might have negated some of the issues that some people are running at the higher resolutions. When it comes to consoles, however, that is a completely different story. Now, people that own a console, especially the last gen consoles now of the PS4 and Xbox One, I would probably recommend not getting this yet, mainly because it is broken on those consoles. You may get away with it possibly on the Pro and the Xbox One S, but other than that, I'd say PlayStation 5 and the new Xbox Series X is probably a better option if you are going to give it a go. But you should be made aware that there have been issues on the PlayStation 5 as well. I mean, I've know someone that has had their PlayStation 5 been completely bricked by it, and they've had to actually send it back for replacement. And on the other side of things, I've also got a friend who's got it that's had no issues whatsoever with it. So it seems to be a bit hit and miss with Sony, which is probably why they've pulled it from their stores. But if you are going to give it a go, I would recommend one of the newer consoles if you're not going to be using a PC for it. Okay, so this is the screen you're introduced with after the intro, which is the main menu. If we go into the settings and have a quick look at all the options that are available within the game, when you first go in there, you're introduced with the audio settings, which is pretty straightforward for most games nowadays, regardless of category. The one thing which is useful if you do stream or make YouTube videos is there is a copyright music disable, so you don't get any copyright strikes on any of your content. Now, there was a report that should have been fixed now where people were still getting strikes, so if that is something you're worried about, I would still recommend turning the car radio, maybe the music off, and then just using your own music in the background. Other than that, The rest of it is pretty straightforward, what you would expect in the sound side of things. Now on the gameplay menu, you can basically change all your aim assists, the performance on crowd density. Now this is something that if you have a lower base CPU, you may need to change, because the higher that is, the more intensive the AI is and things like that, and it obviously requires more processing power. Slow HDD mode, that's if you're not using an SSD, you'd put that on just to try and help with the speed limitations of the older spinning disk hard drives. And then obviously change all your camera views, nudity sensors, but you can also change the nudity sensor when you first start the game. It gives you that option, skipping dialogues and things like that. So again, pretty basic stuff you'd expect in this type of game. Going across to the graphics side, this is where you can make the biggest influence if you don't have the highest spec machine. Now mine is on a ultra preset, and I think that's what it comes through as default. The only thing I've really changed on here is the field of view. It's somewhere around 60 or 70. I'll put it up to 90 just because that's my preference. I probably would put it a bit higher, but I just haven't for the time being. This is where you can change most of the settings for the type of machine that you've got. So it is something that if you find ultra isn't really working for you, but high works fine, you can start tweaking all the individual settings on here to try and help basically find the sweet spot for your machine. Now this does also support ray tracing. There's a whole menu which is activated. It's not available for myself because I've only got the 5700 XT, but it is available to people with the RTX series or the new RX range on the AMD side. It also supports DLSS and also the Fidelity FX, which is the AMD version for upscaling and trying to get better performance out of the ray tracing side of things. Obviously this game is quite demanding, so you may find not using that might have more of an impact on your system. On the interface menu, you get to change things like the colorblind mode. You can also change things like the damage numbers and also how much health and a bit of an X-ray vision-y type settings and things like that. I turn most of those things off if I can, because if someone's going to surprise me, I want the element of surprise. I don't want to know that somebody's suddenly going to sneak around the corner on me before they've done it. You can change all the HUD display visibilities and things like that, so you can tailor it in a way that suits you and the way you want to play. Okay, so onto the key bindings. This is where it's a little bit disappointing. You can change pretty much any key for any of the controls you want, apart from things like the use key. That is hardwired into F. So if you want to change from WASD, for instance, you're very limited where you can move to and still have decent accessibility to the F key. And obviously if you are using WASD, every other game uses E is used, but for whatever reason, this one uses F. Now the other thing is you can't toggle a walk speed and you can't have a dedicated dodge button. But there is a mod which you can get. It is free and it is only available on PC, and it will make it so you can change these keybinds. So it is something I would recommend getting. That mod is very useful, especially if you're somebody that doesn't want to use WASD, or if you want to get rid of that F key and put it onto something that is more uniformed. Now on console, I haven't played it, so I don't know whether they've made the button presses a bit more uniformed and make a bit more logical sense. But on the PC, yeah, it would have been nice if all of this out of the box was changeable as standard. Most games do it. It is a thing which is kind of expected nowadays in the industry, so Project Red, you should be getting that right first time really. But like I say, there is a mod for the PC which will then make it so you can change all that if you want to. Okay, so when you start the game, what do you get introduced with? So the first thing is your level of difficulty. You have easy, normal, hard and very hard. Now I would say I played the first playthrough on hard, and to me that was more of a normal mode for most games. I didn't find it particularly difficult, but it had enough of a challenge to make it interesting. Easy for me would be way too easy, and I think anybody which is kind of a veteran at these style games will probably feel the same. And I honestly think you'd probably want to go very hard, because to me hard is the normal for most games of this category. Once you've chosen the difficulty level you want, you then get given the backstory path that you want to choose. So what you have is Nomad, Street Kid and Corpo. Basically these will influence how the game starts and also choices you can make while playing the game. So although the main story arc will follow the same path, it does give you different ways to approach the story itself. So you'll get certain dialogues which will be available depending on which one you choose, and obviously you'll have certain backgrounds based on it as well. I chose Nomad for the first one, so I was pretty much an outlaw in the Badlands, and then I had to work my way into the city. A street kid will give you more kind of street cred, as it were, as well, and obviously you were started off in the city and were brought up through the ranks within the city. If you choose corpo, then you've lived the high life, you've been part of the establishment and basically been within the winners and things like that and taken advantage of people. So that again will change the gameplay and the options that are available for you and how you will tackle the different scenarios throughout the story arc itself. This will be the next mode that I play when I go through the game, and then after that I'll go on to Street Kid and try out all the different story arcs and see how they work. Once you choose the path you want to take, you then go into the customization, and it's not a bad customization for your character. You start off choosing whether it's male or female. Once you've chosen your gender, you then get into the main meat and potatoes of your character creation in regards to looks. There's quite a decent amount of options there. It's not the most intensive I've seen, but in regards to other ones with the category, it more than holds its own. And yes, there is an option for genitals and pubic hair that you can change on the game as well. The first thing you generally get stuck with is your voice tone. Now this is one thing which I feel they are lacking in, because you can only choose masculine or feminine. It would have been nice to have different levels of tone, but I suppose because of the voice actors that they've used for the actual dialogue, that would make it a little bit more difficult because you'd have to get a lot more in. So you can kind of go past that, but it would have been nice to have that little bit extra customization. Then you get your skin tone options, which have quite a decent amount that you can choose from. I must admit the colouring did seem a little bit off when I was using the actual character creation screen, but once it went into the main game, it actually corrected itself and looked a lot better. I don't know if that's just the way they've used the lighting in the creation screen, but it did seem a bit off in that particular one, so just bear in mind it might look in certain cases like a character has jaundice or something like that, but it actually sorts itself out when it goes into the main game. Hair colour, you can choose a mass amount of hair colours. Again, the colouring will look slightly different when you're in game and within the actual light effects within the game, but you've still got plenty to choose from and they're pretty good going. And the same with eye colour. On the eye colour side of things, you get to choose things that look like contacts. You can choose the kind of red eye effect or just the non-red eye effect, and so you got a decent amount, and I do feel like modders and updates might end up adding more stuff to that. Now as far as the rest of the optimization, this is pretty much all pretty standard stuff which you would expect to see in any customization for a character, and there is a plenty there for you to work on. Like I say, it's not the most intensive, but it is a decent amount to work with and make the character your own. Once you're happy with the character look, you then go through to your overview attributes, which is body, intelligence, reflex, technical ability and cool, and these will basically affect different aspects within the game. For instance, cool will help you with when it comes to stealth. Technical ability will help you with things like hacking. Reflexes, intelligence and body generally speaks for itself and is very similar to what you get in most of the other games. So it's pretty straightforward and the same as most other RPGs that you get there. Everything has to be at a minimum of 3 and you get 7 points available, and obviously you then increase points as you play through the game itself. Now the skill tree doesn't end there, it is a lot more in depth than that. You essentially get your attribute perks and also your perk points. Now your attributes are the same that you saw previously, the same 5 that you had before, although it does look like there's space for a 6th, so I'm assuming that's going to be part of a DLC or something. But when you actually click on any of these, you open up an expanded menu which is additional perks within each of the attributes. So you can have things like 50 more inventory spots, or you can do things like headshots create more damage, more health. So you start having different perks, and each different attribute has a different selection of perks under it. So, and you can have things like assault, you can have stealth, you can have hacking. So there's multiple different attributes that you can physically get, and as you can see on the screen, there are quite a few different routes you can take with it. Now, I haven't gone through the whole attribute system completely to know whether you can max out fully at the end, because I'm still finishing my playthrough off, but you can see that there's quite an extensive list, and it does look like there's space for more to be added at a later stage. So I'll be looking forward to see how they expand on that and what they add to it later on. Like with a lot of RPGs, you then also get things like the character inventory screen where you can choose what weapons. In some cases, and in this particular game, you can also choose what clothes the person's wearing. And then you can also see the items that you've collected throughout the world. Now, you have in the top right a weight allowance, and different items, as you can see on here, will have a different weight number kind of attributed to it. So in this case, 7.8. And now when you're doing that, each item will then add up onto that, and if you go over the weight allowance, you'll then start walking a lot slower, and it will then start affecting your attributes, making you easier to target, making it harder for you to do things. So you either have to drop something, or you can sell things as well. You do get what's classed as kind of just junk, which you pick up, and then that stuff you sell just for cash. You can also sell weapons that you've got repeats on, or break them down to get other materials so you can upgrade and craft different weapons. The crafting side of things is pretty standard that you find in most games with this kind of element on it, where you can make new weapons or upgrade current weapons that you've got as well. Okay, now when looking at the game world itself is quite extensive. They have said that it kind of rivals GTA 5 in regards to scale. Now, that might be the case. I can't say for definite exactly what the mileage is on the actual, or kilometers are, in regards to the actual street kind of layout and things like that. But GTA does feel a little bit more varied, so because of that, it gives it a bigger feel to it, whereas a lot of what you'll be doing in Cyberpunk is driving through the city. Now, because you're staying in one city for the most part, and a bit of the Badlands outside, but because of this, it does kind of give it a slightly smaller feel in regards to the scale. Now, don't get me wrong, it is still pretty big, and driving around it, you can drive around for quite a while there, but it doesn't have the same kind of variety that you get in GTA 5. There is quite a lot to do in the city itself as well, as you can see here, but this does also represent one of the bugs that I have an issue with. When you're going through the legend list, if you're scrolling up and down, as you can see what I'm doing here, it also zooms in and out. It would have been nice to separate that so I can scroll through the list without then screwing up the view I was looking at. So if I'm trying to find something in particular in an area I was in, I then have to go to the list, get to the bit I want, and then zoom in on the area just so I can try and find it. Otherwise, you're constantly moving around. But in regards to missions, the main story is absolutely fantastic. I'm not going to give any spoilers here, but it was really immersive for me and I really enjoyed it. And the side quests are equally just as good. They're side quests that I feel you would actually do if you were in the shoes of V. There's multiple different types, different styles, even down to petty crimes and doing certain kind of jobs that somebody might want you to do for them. So there is a lot of variety, and the thing is, they're not that kind of rinse and repeat kind of side jobs, or not many of them either. There's enough variety there that it kind of keeps it interesting and kind of feels like you're actually living a life outside of the main story as well, which is quite nice. You also get drop-off points to be able to sell things. You've got fixes which also help with the cybernetic side of things, bars, clothing stores. So there's a mass amount you can physically do within this world, and I must admit it does make it a very immersive world. Now, when looking at the gameplay, I'm going to include the bugs in regards to this as well. Now, in regards to it, the game actually plays really well. I actually quite enjoy the gameplay and the mechanics. The shooting mechanics, the AI could be a lot better on. They sometimes do get stuck on walls, which then make it really easy to kill them, especially on certain bosses where normally you'd probably find it would be very difficult and possibly take a couple of attempts. But I managed to get a few of them where they just got stuck, and then I could just hide somewhere and just keep pinpointing them, taking headshots, and I was out of view of them to the point they can shoot me with their guns. So it does have a couple of flaws on it, and yes, it is a shame, but there's no more than what I've seen in other games as well, and hopefully it is stuff that they will fix on that side. The AI could be better. The world does feel lived in. The pathing of some of the civilians can be increased as well, but for the most part it is pretty good, and it does give it a lot of life to there, and there's a lot of stuff going on. The city does feel vibrant. There does seem to be a lot happening. In regards to driving, the cars do have a few bugs with them. Driving style, it feels a bit floaty, so you do feel like you're not really in contact. It does with the road as much. It does feel a little bit floaty, but not the worst I've seen, but it could be better. Again, there is a mod to improve this, but obviously that's only PC. So other than that, the other thing I've kind of come across is when you call your car, Sometimes it will render itself inside a building or a dumpster or something else that's in there, so in like the world, so you can't physically get in it, or it's damaged itself in doing so. So I've had to walk a bit down the road and then recall it, and then it sorted itself out. And in other instances, when I've loaded up a save game, all of a sudden the car that wasn't there when I saved it is there now, and is actually half in my car and half out. So there are a few little glitches on that kind of thing, especially on the car side of thing. And the other thing is the cops. They really do need to be improved, and the reason for that is as soon as you get wanted on you, cops suddenly start spawning out of nowhere. Now, this is something where I feel they could take a leaf out of some of the other games like GTA and stuff like that, whereas you get wanted, and yes, a cop will spawn somewhere on the map, but it won't be right next to you. You'll suddenly see them starting to travel to you, like it's as if a patrol vehicle nearby has had to come to you. Whereas at the moment, you'll have foot soldiers suddenly appear next to you, and you'll suddenly have them all around you. In some cases, they won't spawn at all, and you can. And I never found it difficult to get away from them. Now, I'd like to see it where it scales a lot better to the point they don't spawn on you like they're doing at the moment, but if you do get higher on the wanted list, they put up more of a fight to try and find you, even to the point that maybe the car stays recognised, and unless you change your car, then you're essentially got a chance of being wanted if they come across you again. But so that side of things is a bit buggy on the old arrest or wanted system, and the same thing is I can loot a whole building right in front of the person and they don't batter an eyelid. They just say hey or something like that. It would be nice to have a bit more consequences to your actions, but again, it's not a massive problem. It's not necessarily groundbreaking or game breaking, sorry, but it is something which I would like to see them improved on, just to increase the immersion within the game itself. Other than that, the actual interacting with characters is absolutely great. You do kind of get a bit attached to some of the characters as well, so they're really good at they're making it so you kind of build that rapport. And yeah, the general way I did find myself, I had a certain fix I like to go into, and as opposed to all the other ones on there, because I kind of felt like, you know what, he's helped me out, so I kind of want to repay the favour to him and stuff like that. So it's quite nice that there is that element where it kind of gives you that bit of an emotional side of things, and it's nice that you can kind of go off and do your own thing as well. So I have to say, gameplay wise, I do really enjoy it. I think it has had a lot of bad press, but I honestly think it's not as bad as some of the press has said. Now, obviously, consoles, that is a different story, but in regards to the PC version, it's not as bad as it's come across. Now, bugs-wise, there are plenty of bugs in the game. I'm not going to deny that. They're not game-breaking bugs, but they can be slightly immersion-breaking. Some of the ones that I've seen reported have been fixed. Like, I haven't had the issue where the person's driving a car and all of a sudden his body shoots up into the character screen kind of pose and then goes back into the car. I haven't had that, so I think they may have fixed that. But I have had things where somebody's drinking a cup of coffee, they pull their hand down and the coffee cup is still by their mouth, or they're smoking a cigarette and the cigarette gets stuck somewhere and their hand actions don't relate to where the cigarette is. So there's little graphical things like that. I have also seen things, like I say, with the cars where they've morphed into each other, or they call in the car, it's pulled it into a dumpster or something like that. And a couple of little graphical glitches where it takes a split second for the graphics to pop in. But some of that could be down to the fact that my CPU is an old CPU, so it might be, although I'm not getting frame problems, it might just be taking a bit of time for it to pop certain things in. Now, other than that, like I say, the game's been really playable. The bugs have not been anything that I haven't expected or seen in a lot of other games. I mean, every game has its bugs, especially nowadays. It'd be nice if they did start making games a little bit more with quality control in mind, but it's a sign of the times, unfortunately. But the game itself runs smoothly enough on PC, and it is enjoyable enough, and the bugs were nowhere near enough to make me feel like I didn't want to play the game anymore. I still enjoyed every second of the game I played. So in conclusion, the game itself, is it worth buying? I would say if you're on the standard PlayStation 4 or Xbox One, I'd say avoid it for the time being. They are talking about fixing it, but I don't know when that is. The rumours are around February, but things have been moved quite regularly on this, so I wouldn't hold that as gospel yet. So on those consoles, I'd probably say avoid for the time being. If you've got the PlayStation Pro or the Xbox One S, which has the 4K kind of abilities on it, then you may find that the game will run a little bit better on it. PlayStation 5, again, it's a bit hit and miss. I mean, for the most part, I'd say the mass majority are finding no issues with it. Maybe a few performance issues here and there, but I do need to reiterate that I do know people which have had problems where it has either bricked the PlayStation or it's been unplayable for them. Xbox Series X, now that's a console which it should work pretty well on and fine on as well. I'd say you probably find it will have a similar kind of play style and feel to the PlayStation 5. I haven't heard of reports of issues on there directly, but like I said, the console side of things, it is struggling on a little bit. The other thing on the original or the last gen consoles are the graphical abilities. There have been a lot of graphical glitches, so there's bugs on the console side, especially the last gen consoles, which aren't on the PC or the later gen consoles, probably because obviously the hardware upgrade that they've got makes it easier for them to play the game. The game itself is about £46.99 or $59.99, and if for my European friends, €55.29. Now, this is at time of recording, and the pricing is fluctuating quite a lot at the moment depending where you go, so I would shop around. You probably will find it cheaper, and you will find certain places, like for instance Green Man Gaming, I found it for £46.99, which is about a £5 off. It's not a lot, but it is money off in the end of the day. Now, for people on PC, I can highly recommend the game. I mean, my computer isn't the latest and greatest high-end machine, and it was run absolutely fine on that. The bugs there haven't been game-breaking enough to not enjoy it, and they will start being fixed as time goes on as well. And there's a lot you can do with it, and I think it's got some replayability in it as well, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it. So it is a game I can recommend, and like I say, if you're on the latest consoles, then it could be worth a try, but anything older than that, I'd probably give it a miss for the time being until we know that they've patched it and made it more stable for the last gen consoles. This has been my review of Cyberpunk 2077. I hope you've enjoyed it. It's been a little bit longer than my average review, mainly because there's so much to cover and there's been so much that's gone on with the game. But I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, please feel free to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. I do also stream on Twitch, which I've got the logo in front of me now, and I'll put the channel in the description as well. So feel free to jump over there and join the community, have a bit of a laugh while you're at it. I will be streaming some of Cyberpunk as well, so if that's something you want to see, feel free to join, and I look forward to seeing you guys there. I have got another review coming up shortly as well, which is going to be a more retro-y review, so something that's done from a bit of the old and adventure games. So feel free to watch that and let me know what you think. If there's anything you do want me to review or anything you want to see on the channel, please leave a comment below and I'll be sure to respond and also take note of any suggestions that you guys have. I've been CT Tech Gaming, this has been my review, and I hope to see you guys in the next one.